Oh, Goya, Jaje Witache, Hinkche Ska. My name is James Pepper Henry. I'm a member of the Kaw Nation, and I'm also vice chairman of the Kaw Nation, and I live in Sperry, Oklahoma.
Hawaii. My name is Carrie V. Wilson. My Quapaw name is Majita, which means red sun. I'm from Miami, Oklahoma, and I'm Quapaw, Peoria, and Eastern Shawnee.
Noah, Hawaii. My name is Richard Lookout, ruling his son. I'm Pawnee and Osage from Pawhuska, Oklahoma.
Land acknowledgements are becoming more and more popular these days, and from the Kaw perspective, we don't have a concept of owning the land, or we didn't before the arrival of Europeans. And so this idea of acknowledging tribal land goes back to a westernized way of thinking about land, commodifying the land, that land is something that can be owned. And my elders always told me that the earth is our mother. You can't own your mother. And so we didn't have a concept of owning the land, some piece of paper or title to something that told us that we own the land. So I think land acknowledgements, in my opinion, are misguided in that sense that it reinforces this westernized way of thinking that you can own the land, and it perpetuates that. So when we have these land acknowledgements in different places, it reinforces that idea that, okay, this land belonged to this group of people, now it belongs to this group of people. That's not the way we thought about these things. We can't own our mother.
Yeah. Land acknowledgement, to me, in my perspective, is embedded in Indian culture, because in our language we have names for these places of our ancestors, and to own something is foreign to us because we have a spiritual connection to the land. We give thanks to things we take from it, such as our food and our shelter, and to have that concept of ownership is non-existent in our culture, and it's foreign. So to me, land recognition is something that I really have a problem with. And I think most Native Americans have a problem with, saying this is ours and this is where we were. But all Native Americans roamed all lands. And but to own a certain part of the land or say that that's my territory, to me, I don't see it.
I think a land acknowledgement is acknowledging our cultural landscape. Each tribe has its own culture, and we gravitate to certain areas of land, and the land makes part of our culture, and the culture makes part of the land that we inhabited. So it's acknowledging the culture, acknowledging the specific individual tribes, that we're all independent of each other. There's not an amalgamation of peoples. It is so we had our own language and our own culture, and the land typifies that too.
It's in our language. So we have, if wherever you're from, you have it in your language. You have, you name the Atlantic Ocean, you have that. You have the Smoky Mountains. You have all these things that are in our language. So we have no word for Pacific Ocean in our language because we weren't there. We don't have that. Or in the Southwest, we don't have that. We just have it in our language, and where we're from, they connect spiritually and through our language.
In our way of thinking and our way of talking about the land, we say we belong to the land. This is the land that we belong to. We're in the St. Louis area right now, and this is homeland to several tribes, but in particular the Osage, and maybe to an extended the Dagia people. We're all Dagia people here today. And we have a connection to the land, but we say we belong to the land. We don't say we own this land. And that's really a holistic view about everything, that rather than in Judeo-Christian beliefs, God has given man dominion over everything. That's not the way we think about things. We were put here to be a part of something larger, not here to dominate everything. And so I think of ourselves as stewards of the creation that the Creator gave us, something that we have to take care of, not something that we overexploit and possess. And so we, the way we say it, we belong to the land, not that the land belongs to us. As a young man, I was visiting my great-grandfather. He was probably in his late 80s, and he lived in North Tulsa in a little neighborhood called Turley. And I would visit him, and he would be sitting on the front porch, and he chewed tobacco. So he'd be chewing tobacco and kind of leaning over, spitting into the spittoon, and then he would start speaking, but he spoke to me this foreign language, and he wasn't really talking to me. He was just talking to himself. And my grandfather was there, and I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and I went to my grandfather and I said, you know, what's great grandpa saying? Why is he talking to himself? And he said, well, he's not talking to himself, he's talking to God. And I said, why is he talking to God? He says, because he's the last person in the family and one of the last people in the tribe to speak the Konze language, to speak the Dagia language, and he doesn't have anybody else to talk to. And he said the reason why he's doing that is because God gave us the language. It's a gift from God. And so he's honoring the Creator, and he's talking to God in the language that God gave us. And so that had a profound effect on me as a young man, and as I got older, it became a mission of mine to try to revive our language again, because that's a gift from God. God gave us that language, and we need to preserve it. We need to perpetuate it. And so several years later, in my 20s, I helped start our tribal language program to bring back one of the gifts that God gave us. And that's the same way with the land as well. It's a gift to us, and we have to take care of that gift. We have to be stewards of that. We can't, we can't let that go. And so I've seen a lot of great things in the St. Louis area here, especially working with the Osage Nation, trying to reclaim some of these cultural sites. And a lot of the native peoples in this area are virtually invisible, and to be able to make that connection again to the land and perhaps again be good stewards of the land in this area, I think that's really important, not only for the tribe, but for the citizens that live here that really don't know much about the culture and heritage.
I think that's important because today, we're disconnected from the land. We're disconnected from so many things because we live in an urban environment. And to have the opportunity to acknowledge the land, but also bring attention to the fact that I love all the green spaces in St. Louis, and it's important for us to connect or be grounded to that land again. And I think that by the land acknowledgement, I think it's acknowledging the fact that we as people have an attachment and a need to be grounded and feel the grass and participate in feeling that wind and leaves and everything that goes on in nature. We have to be a part of that as it's part of our soul. So it's important.
I think we lost our spirituality, that spiritual connection to the land, and the giving thanks of taking something from it and offering prayer for it is something that Native Americans do, and it's being lost. And the connection between the land and the spirituality and the heavens, it all connects. So it's in our language too. So I'm proud to say that as an Osage and a Pawnee that I can walk every day in my homelands. As today I'm sitting here in St. Louis, the home of my Osage, big Osage, to be sitting here where my ancestors and my forefathers were, and to go to Cahokia and give thanks to them, standing in that on that mound and praying for my people, praying for all peoples to come together. And that spirituality is something that we need to hang on to, like our language, because it all connects, and it all connects us with the land. We don't own the land. We're just here as stewards. I think that if we learn, our younger generations learn the language, they can make that correlation between the spirituality and the connection between the celestials and your place in this world.
I think rather than using the term land acknowledgement, I like to call these statements people acknowledgement. I think the people need to come first because we've been cleansed from this land. And by acknowledging the people, I think there's a greater responsibility there to do more than just this performative statement that somehow absolves people of some of these atrocities in the past, but acknowledging living, breathing people. We're still here. We've been removed from this area, but we're still living and breathing. And having that connection again is really important. And I think it's important that there are actions behind these statements, what I would call people statements. That what are the actions behind that? Having us here today to interact with students and faculty, to be involved in programming moving forward. Those are all important steps, I think. Shows action behind these statements that otherwise are just meaningless. They're moral hypocrisy in a way. When people make these statements, somehow, they acknowledge, oh, this land belonged to these people. We've made the statement, we can move forward now, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. And I think that's misguided. If you're going to make the statement, you've got to have actions behind it. And
It needs to be more than just check the box.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So. I'm the former executive director of First Americans Museum in Oklahoma City, and we've actually developed a template for people interested in developing a land acknowledgement, or I like to say people acknowledgement. And in my opinion, the first step should be to contact the tribe, contact the tribal administration, because I truly believe in our right to self-governance and our sovereignty, and we need to exercise this government to institution relationship. So that first step should be to contact or write a letter to that tribal government. Now it's always difficult to get a hold of somebody there, but they usually will pass that on to the right people to help you. Somebody contacts me, I'm in a position now in the tribe where I can make decisions, but if I'm just a regular tribal member and somebody comes to me and they say, we want to do a land acknowledgement or a people acknowledgement about the Kaw people, I really don't have the authority to speak on behalf of my tribe. I would have to go somebody that has that authority. So starting at that level and recognizing that government to institution relationship, that's a place to start. And then hopefully they'll pass that on to the right people, the historic preservation people or the cultural preservation people to help develop those statements. But I really do believe that we should honor the governments of our tribal nations. We are sovereign nations, and that conversation should start at that level.
That's what I would recommend too. I would recommend going specifically to the tribal government.
I like the idea of tribal governments, but we're leaving an aspect out too, which is the elders. Our elders are our best resource as to our history, our language, and our ways. And I think in today's society, our elders are being overlooked, and they're being put on the back burner from these academia people that are come here and learn how to be Indian through academics and not knowing their ways and the procedures in which they function. So if we go and talk to tribes about this, we need to talk to our elders too and get their viewpoint. As me, anything that I do in my tribal life, I talk to my elders, my Uncle Mowgli, I talk to my Uncle Eddie Jr., I talk to these people and get their insight before I even make a decision about anything like that. So I think that when we talk about things like this, we need to consult with our elders and get their viewpoint on it before we make any kind of decision about anything.
And one of the things I think, action items that can happen from these people acknowledgements is bringing the language back as well too. We were visiting a local park here, and they're bringing back some of the Degia language into the park, and all of these things that have names, have Anglo names, had native names at one point in time. And I think that by renaming some of these important places in this area, we're bringing attention to the general public or the broader public. They're beginning to understand, they're seeing it, they're hearing it, that there were people here before the arrival of Europeans, and there are important places here, and they all had indigenous names, and they had indigenous caretakers here too. So I think that's important as an action item, developing these people acknowledgements, is that we start to rename these things with their original names, not with these Anglo names.
And we've seen that lately with tribes coming in and renaming streams or land areas or recreational areas, and giving the opportunity to name that in that tribe's own specific language, and that's a turning point, I think, for us, and it's something that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago.
And this, it's only been in the last 20 years that museums and other institutions have reached out to community people in different tribes to get their feedback and get their input on things. And just having a conversation with you in the last few days, there's a lot of interpretation about effigies and iconography at Cahokia. Non-natives are interpreting these things without any cultural context, and oftentimes they're wrong in those interpretations. And if people would just consult with descendants of the people that lived in this area, I think their eyes would open up and they'd understand that some of these things are not what they thought they were. You were showing me a piece of ceramic that was interpreted as being a sea serpent, and a lot of us, we incorporate the otter in our regalia. And you saw right away, that's not a sea serpent, that's an otter. It's a river otter, a cat monster. And so in anthropology, in archaeology, it's a relatively new thing, a new concept to actually consult with indigenous peoples about the material culture that they've created. And so we're seeing the next generation come up. They're much better about it. But when I was coming up through the ranks in the 1980s, it was very biased. The anthropology was very biased, and Native peoples didn't have a voice in these things. But they do today, and it's great to see younger people getting involved in this field and really changing the way people think about things. And consultation is so important. So that consultation is very, very important when developing these people acknowledgements, that somebody doesn't sit in a back room and a non-Native person and try to write these things. I think having those consultations with the people that are directly associated, who belong to the land, is very, very important. And as Ricky said, it's important to talk to some of the cultural bearers, the people that have the knowledge. And again, to get through the front door, having that connection with the tribal government, but also getting connected with the cultural people and the people that have that knowledge.
He just touched upon the otter. I have a recording of my grandfather Henry talking about that otter, and he said that's the only animal the devil couldn't catch. So it was sin. It was free of sin, and that's why we put it on our our dance sticks, and we wear it in our hats and on the back, because we want to take that personality of that animal and its characteristics, and the characteristics of an otter. It's a good father, good family man, good provider, you know,
Protector.
something like protector. Yeah, that's the correlation between Indians and the land and the animals and the celestial. It all connects. So when you look at it like that, it's hard for a European to see it. But our Indian ways are easy. They're so easy that they're hard for people to understand. Being with Carrie and going with her to different places and seeing museum items all over, and it's lightened my mind and my understanding, and wanting me to learn more about my culture identity and where we come from, and where we're going. And I think the immersion of the languages of the Kaw and the Osage and all these tribes that had lost it and bringing it back is going to have a profound effect on our next generations, and how we understand who we are and where our place in this world, in this universe, and we can perpetuate our culture through our music, our language, our art, our dance, and we do that. And if you look at Native American dress, you can, and if you know what you're looking for, you can see it. As in Osage dress, the patterns of the ribbon work used to signify a family, or the color of the cloth they use signifies if he's a firstborn or secondborn, and the things that we wear and how we wear them and what we do, you know, it all comes together as and brings us together as a people. I'm very fortunate to have these recordings of my grandfather and Wake and Iron, and these old men. They shed light on a lot of things that are lost, and to hear them, I have to go and research it and then find the context in which they're talking about. And then when I do, it enlightens me more, and I become more of a Osage or my clan, my Bear clan. You know, my name has significance, Ledonkaway, you know, and we're losing that, I think. But if we teach our children the language at a certain age, and they come and they grow into it, then no matter what they look like or who they are, they still have that bond of the language, and they can go on with it.
We visited a few museums here in St. Louis on our trip, and I don't think people realize that when they display some of the things that we've created as Native peoples, and perhaps they were buried with our relatives, or they were taken from us when we were removed. These are reminders of what we've lost. And when I see these historic pieces and archaeological items on display in museums and even in the repositories, it makes me sad in a way, because it's society is more interested in the things that we made than they're interested in us as people. Yes. They've tried to erase us as people or assimilate us, but holding on to these things that we made as some kind of almost like a trophy or something. And most museums have their roots in colonialism. They're the repositories of the spoils of conquest by European countries over indigenous peoples around the world. But we're seeing a shift in the museum world now, where now indigenous peoples are being invited back to the museum to help provide more context for these items. But I've been to hundreds of museums around the world, and a lot of these museums that display ethnographic material or cultural material, it's the spoils of conquest. It's almost trophies of conquest over indigenous peoples. It's the same here in St. Louis to a certain degree, and but it's enlightening to see that now the shift is, okay, we've got to bring indigenous peoples back in to provide the context for these things, and in some cases through legislation like NAGPRA, some of these things can actually go back to the tribal communities. But the people should come first, and the relationship should be established with these museums, with indigenous communities, not try to interpret these things or flaunt these things without that relationship.
I understand what you're talking about, because when I was going to school at the University of Arkansas, and I was working as a work-study student with the Archaeological Survey, there was a disjoint. I was relating to the cultural items, but the staff that I was working with recognized the items as being, Mississippian, but they didn't recognize the fact that the tribes associated with that. And it went through really a learning period between the both of us. And then they realized, oh, yeah, these guys really are associated with this, or they do have a feeling towards this. And it's been that journey of, going from no consultation and looking at it as just an artifact to really making it part of a whole, and these items, I think, a lot of times are puzzle pieces. And just like me being able to look at that effigy pot and saying, this isn't a cat monster, this is an otter, and then being able to open up that whole door for explanation of why it is an otter and what's important. And it's no longer an artifact, it's a part of us. And it's a part of us. And that's why consultation is so important. Being able to consult, and whether it's Section 106, federal government requires consultation. And it's absolutely key to tribal people being able to have an input. And it's unfortunate that there has to be a federal regulation about it, but it's important too that it opens the door for us to have our voices heard.
Well, Carrie's an unsung hero in this, and we both were tribal historic preservation officers for our respective tribes early on, after the NAGPRA legislation was passed in the early 1990s. Yeah. And the kinds of things that Carrie's talking about couldn't have happened 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And the fact that she's out there and people like her are going to museums and again, asserting our sovereignty to be able to have a voice in these things and to be able to work with the museums.
Well, Jim, we're in really good company here, because Carrie is foremost 30. We heard that she's individually repatriated more culturally affiliated items than anyone in the United States. So we're here with a superstar in that field. And I'm very proud of her and what she's accomplished and what she's doing now in that field, and trying to bring awareness and understanding in that field, and doing it in a good way, and a good heart, good feeling, like that Indian way. So we are fortunate to be sitting here with her.
Well, I'm sure, Carrie, you remember when the inventories, the first batch of inventories were sent out to the tribes in 1995 and 1996. I remember just getting stacks of these inventories, and required by law to send these out, but they were very incomplete, not a lot of information. They would just say Plains Indian. This item is Plains Indian, without any affiliation, and it took a lot of work to try to sort all of this out over all these. Even we're still sorting it out after.
Well, the other thing about it too, when tribal historic preservation or cultural resources was just happening, this was under Section 106 of the Tribal Historic Preservation Act, or the Historic Preservation Act, and just like NAGPRA, the Native American Graves Protection Act, we as tribes did not have any regulations or any direction as to how to direct or how to process all of these inquiries and what we're going to do with them, or if they're going to build a highway, how it's going to affect us, because we were removed. We were moved to Oklahoma from these areas, and it was the fact that we had to invent and come up with an entire new way of thinking. And then we had to hire people to be able to process all that information. And a lot of times the tribes didn't have resources for it. So I think as far as Indian people go, I think that Indian people have quickly adapted to whatever's been presented to them. And that's been one of the reasons why we've survived like we have, is because we have been adaptable. And we have adapted to this. And we're adapting to the land and the idea that, hey, we're a part of this again. They're asking us questions. They're asking us how we feel about it. And by the same process, it's kind of reconnecting. It's a two-way street. It's the community reaching out to the tribes that once inhabited this area, and it's the tribes being able to reconnect with their roots.
Well, we have a responsibility as members of different tribes to work together,
Yes.
so that we're not in conflict when we go visit these museums or when we're talking to people that manage these repositories, that we have to come unified, that we've agreed amongst each other. And I remember getting these inventories back in the 90s, and all these sets of human remains, ones that we knew for sure were Conze or Kaw. And I went to my great uncle, is again going to elders in the tribe to get advice. And my uncle Luther Pepper was vice chairman of the Kaw Nation at the time, and we were working together to repatriate and rebury the remains of our people. I didn't know what to do. We don't have a ceremony to rebury somebody, because we never thought that somebody would ever disinter or dig up our people and put them in a museum somewhere. So I said, Uncle, what do we do? We don't have a ceremony to do this, and I want to be respectful when we put our people back in the ground. And my uncle said, they were buried properly the first time, and there's no way we can replicate what was done. Their loved ones put them, on their journey. And so he said, we're just going to place them back in the ground, maybe say a prayer and give an offering, but that's it. We're going to keep it simple, because that's not a tradition that we have. This is something that's forced upon us to be able to have to do this, to put things back into balance again, but there's no tradition for
You
this.
saying that brings to mind this thing that Carrie told me one time about her and her adopted father, Charles Chibetty, and how he went about doing it. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the main thing is that they said, all those ceremonies have already been done. All we can do is muddle it up. So we don't do it for those bones that we're putting back in the ground. We do it to protect ourselves, and say, we're sorry this has happened to you. As far as thinking about land acknowledgement, it really goes back to people acknowledgement. We lived here. And when we have these situations where we have repatriated our ancestors, we don't want to take them to a land they never knew. We want to be able to put them back in their homeland, which is different than ours, because we were taken away and put into another place. So as part of that land acknowledgement, I've always requested from states or communities to give us an area set aside specifically for the reburial, to reinter our remains, our ancestors. And to me, that's the ultimate land acknowledgement, is to give us a place for the secure and permanent burial of our people.
And actually, Carrie's done that
Yeah.
already once, and I
Yeah.
think we're in the process of doing it.
But that would be nice for St. Louis and the surrounding areas and communities to be able to set aside those areas for us. Whether it's coming from a museum or you're working on a highway project and that person's going to have to be disinterred because of it's too close to surface or whatever, we have those situations set aside, land set aside for that person to be able to be put down permanently.
Yeah, we have the same mindset with the Konze people that we try to reinter our people as close to where they came from. Obviously, they can't go back always in the same spot, but having these regional burial sites and people, the hashtag land back is very popular right now, and it's kind of a buzz phrase, land back, land back. Well, it's more complicated than that, and more than one tribe may have had the same territory over centuries, and to give the land back to one particular tribe over another is very complicated. But if people are going to give land back, and I'm working with folks in Kansas to do exactly what you're doing, is to set aside to have land for the reinterment, the common areas for
many tribes.
Yes. So even I don't believe in that term unassociated, because these remains and funerary objects are associated to somebody. And the further back in time that you go, the more likely you're going to have multiple ancestors. So if we all work together as tribes, the important thing is to get our people, our relatives, back on their journey.
Yeah, I want to say, we need to work as tribes to get whatever we can back, and
it's working towards a common goal. All of the tribes working together, because if you have a unknown burial and an inadvertent discovery, and the tribes have a common area to rebury and it's already been established, then that consultation process that's required goes so much quicker, and we are all in agreement, and it's a positive experience.
Well, I think we need, as an Indian people, to start legislation to make that possible, make it easier for people to want to give land back to Native American tribes, or give back head rights, or give back whatever that they possess of Indians that they don't have the right to own. There's laws on the books to take that from an Indian, but there's no laws to give it back. So I think that needs to be addressed.
We're sitting here and we have a beautiful landscape behind us. Our people are buried in this soil. And when I'm in Kansas or I'm in Missouri, which is the homeland of the Konze people, I think about that. I think I'm walking on the ground where centuries, if not millennia, of our people have been buried and have been recycled into the earth. And all of this, and the word sacred is overused, I think, a lot of times, but I think people need to realize that live in these areas that our people have been here for centuries, and they're buried. The remains are in the soil. It's part of the ecosystem now. And I think about that wherever I go.
Well, I would think too that you being Kaw, she being Quapaw, and me being Osage and Pawnee, we're a different breed. We might have those bloods running through our bodies, but we aren't those people. Those people were free. They roamed their own lands. They talked their own language, and they did their own thing. We don't have that. We're not like them. We only have the name and the blood in us. If they seen us, they wouldn't think that we're them. Just like we shouldn't look at them and think that we're like them, because we're not. We live in America. They lived in their world, and they were free. And they roamed this land and did whatever they wanted to, where we can't do that. The land is, like you said, it's overemphasized that it's sacred, to a lot of Indians still that can talk their language and live in their homelands know that, but we don't. We're trying to learn our language. We're trying to learn our everything that's been perpetuated and brought to us in that order. But in the sense of being Native American, we've lost that. We've lost that freedom. We've lost that language. We've lost those ways. But we're trying to hang on to what we have now, and we're doing a pretty good job, I think. As we're bringing languages back, and with that language is going to come a lot of other things. And knowledge is the main thing. But what I want to stress here about land and Native Americans is that we have to come together as a people. And once we come together as a people, we can get things done as a people instead of as a tribe, and get a stronger voice in government and in the way that they see us and view us. You know, right now we're Osage Pawnee or something like that. You know, whereas if we were just all together as one, a big voice, we'd have a bigger influence in how we're treated and how we're dealt with.
I think that traditional language provides a way of thinking that English does not. You know, it provides a native way of thinking, because you look at those terms and how those sentences break down, or even the word itself. It provides insight into a past that we've kind of lost touch with.
My grandfather, when he went to Haskell, he knew how to speak Osage. And he went to Haskell and he learned how to talk English. So when he came back and he got in these ceremonies, English didn't work. So he started thinking, and it started coming back to him. And then he could deal with it. But you have to, it's like Indian songs, they always said that you have to sing them every day or you'll lose them. So you have to talk the language every day. And I grew up in a home with my grandma and grandpa, and they talked Osage every day. And they lived that lifestyle, that Ilompa, that Mitsihek, that those honored children. They got up, and they got dressed, and they sat like this when they were around. But if those other children, the Wehas and the Shunkas and those people there like that, they would just be out doing whatever, you know. But when those people showed up, that's when they come in. They sat and they got dressed, and that's the kind of life that I lived in. And they were really strict with us. The things that you see and do now are not practiced anymore, you know. But I lived it, and I seen it. So to bring back the language is good, and the land too. The land says a lot. We're still here. We're going to be here, and we're thriving. We are thriving.
All of those things are connected: the language, the land,
Yeah.
our cultural life ways. You start taking one away from the other, then we stop becoming who we are, and that's why it's important for us to keep fighting to keep these things, because people are always trying to take these things away from us.
You know, it's just like it's like dancing. You know, when you're dancing in that arena on the ground. You feel that grass with your moccasins and things. But now it's, you know, it's too hot. We don't want to do that. There's bugs. You know, so we end up dancing inside an arena in a casino someplace or something. But it's nice, but you kind of lose that touch with the ground. You know, that connection that we're, you know, trying to preserve too, but it's convenient to be inside.
Those old ones
we don't
said
have
that
to worry about
you couldn't express
rain
your
or
true
anything.
feelings or what you meant using English, but they could do it in Indian. Yeah. And it sounds a whole lot better to them, they say, you know, but that's a part of it. So when you're talking about things and you're talking, if you have to grasp on the language and you're talking and you say it in Indian, you cover a lot of things in that. But in English, you can cover just a specific thing. You know, you're not getting the real meaning of what you're wanting to say.
Every word has multiple meanings to it in our language. So it does. It's much broader than, like you said, than just speaking English.
Land acknowledgement is recognizing a people, and it's recognizing their cultural landscape. But more so than a land acknowledgement just being a statement, it should be the opening of a dialogue. between Native peoples and the local communities. That's the most important thing for me.
We're still here. We're the indigenous peoples of this land, and we may have been physically removed from the area we're in now, but we're still here. And it's important for people to understand that it's not just about the land, it's about the people that are connected to the land. And I want young Native people to remember where they come from. And I hope they'll continue to fight for the things that we still have and hopefully reclaim many of the things that we've lost. And we're starting to do that now. We're starting to bring back a lot of things that we've lost. And it may never be like it used to be, but it's important that we continue these cultural practices in the best way that we can with the knowledge that we have moving forward.
I'm proud of the fact that I'm still here and I can trace my ancestors back to the beginning. And to have that blood flowing through me and to acknowledge where we've been and where we're at now in this world and universe, the spirituality, the language, it all connects to the land. And when you uncover the top layer, you'll see that it is ours, and that the connection between that world and this world becomes in the light, and you can see who owned this land and who was here, who died here, who's buried here, and we're still here, so it's ours.